Welcome to part 3. So we have just climbed up above the launch of Annecy. If you haven't watched part 1 and 2, please go ahead. It's absolutely cool flying. You will learn a ton and there are gorgeous images. This ridgeline works super nicely. The biggest mistake you can do here is to actually thermal. So you will see I just fly straight line, I follow the ridgeline, I don't even turn once. And at the end of the ridgeline, I'm at base, so I actually don't even take the last climb. So I fly behind this cloud in order to not get sucked in, and I haven't turned once. So it always amazes me how well this ridgeline works in the afternoon. And now, back up on base, I will try to push forward in order to complete this Tour du Lac of the Lac Léman of the Lake of Geneva. And it's really good and fast flying here because we're in the afternoon. These slopes here are facing west, northwest, so they're really well hit by the sun, and also they have some beautiful clouds above it. So overall it's fast flying, I can really push. Additionally, I have some tailwind as well, so this really helps to do quite fast kilometers around here. So even sometimes I skip some climbs as here on the peak, because I think I have enough altitude to actually reconnect on the next ridge line, and I'm just taking some lift on the glide underneath the clouds. So it's quite interesting to see that actually we have a bit of a southwest wind, so when you watch the clouds and how the clouds drift. But this is more or less higher up in the higher levels, so it doesn't really stop me from flying down below. So here again above the ridge I can grab some thermal. Once I have grabbed it a bit lower, I push towards the more high ground to get a stronger climb, and this brings me back up to base, so I can climb all the way to the clouds here and make the next big move. So this is the Val d'Arve. It's always a huge crossing, and there's kind of this isolated mountain in the middle, which is a good trigger, but it's also a bit tricky because the valley wind flows over this mountain. And I'm heading for this kind of rocky faces in front of the mountain, and they often work as quite good triggers. And again, in this case, I can find a good climb which brings me up before I actually reach the mountain. And then I fly over the mountain, and interestingly enough, there is almost no climb. Even though there is a good looking cloud behind it, I don't get much of a thermal. So I'm always a bit confused how this works around here, but hey, as long as I get up, I don't ask too many questions. I just take the thermal and continue. Then coming up after this next crossing is a kind of a standard point to head to. So this ridge here is often nicely into the valley wind, and even if you arrive very low here, you can soar back up on these cliff faces. But now it's already a bit late, and you can see there is quite a bit of cirrus clouds moving in, so this dampens down the thermals and makes everything a bit slower. And I do have to be careful to not race too hard anymore and take my time to actually climb up. Yeah, so this is generally a quite tricky situation now, because the clouds are quite dense and they really shade in everything. So here I say to myself, okay, let's take some time and climb and just get up, because you can see also the clouds are starting to fall apart, and just above my head there are still some wisps. So I actually do take the time and climb almost to base here before I go on the next glide, because I'm not very confident that there is really a good thermal ahead. And this is actually the case. So unfortunately, the high cirrus cloud has really shaded in everything and killed off most of the thermals. It's very lifty, so I still fly along the ridgeline in order to not lose a lot of altitude, and I can actually do kind of a huge final glide here. But unfortunately, I also cannot really find another climb. This is a bit sad because, as you saw just maybe half an hour ago, beautiful clouds were above this ridgeline here. But now that the sun, the engine of the thermals is gone, also the thermals are gone. So I have nothing else left than just glide along these ridge lines, take as much altitude as I can, use the little bit of lift that is left, and just optimize my glide so I don't push too much speed bar anymore as well, in order to not to have the best glide possible and make it as far as possible. So this is often a good tactic. When you hug the terrain, you get further. But ultimately the end of the ridge comes near, and I'm flying a bit more towards the low ground in order to use the last bit of altitude that I have and glide. But then I also see that towards the right there is just a gorge coming up, and there is a good looking road, and it's pretty obvious that I have to land somewhere here, that it won't continue. So I decide to head to this town and land next to the road in order to be prepared and hitchhike to make it back home. So here is the landing. I always try to land as close to the road as possible so that I don't have to walk very much. And in order to do this, it's a bit tricky. As you can see, there are quite a bit of lamp posts and so on. So I come in quite tight and land here nicely on this beautiful green grass next to the road. And then I can hitchhike back home. So yeah, it was a cool flight. I have not made it around the Lake of Geneva completely, so this is a project that is still open, and I hope you enjoyed this last part, and watch the first parts too as well, and see you next time.